Welcome to Webinar Wednesday. My name is Sharon Fitzpatrick, and I'm your co-host for today's webinar, In the Trenches, Real-World Solutions to Corporate Presentation Challenges, with presentation strategist Nolan Haims. Joining me today as co-host is Dave Olinsky, editor of PresentationXpert. One of the things we'd like to encourage you to do is tweet during this presentation. Just tweet to hashtag PresentationXpert. We'll be glad to retweet and share with our community as it grows. Today's webinar is part of the Expert Thinking Program, which offers a peer-to-peer, robust community for presentation professionals to share ideas, resources, and start discussions. In addition, Webinar Wednesdays offer engaging conversations with presentation experts like Nolan, Matt Gambino, Gitesh Bajaj, Rick Altman, Ellen Finkelstein, Mike Parkinson, and others. To submit a question or tell us about yourself, just enter it in the question box on your dashboard. We will try and assemble all the questions and get to as many as we can during the Q&A, or if there's a point where we can interrupt or to have start a discussion with Nolan, we'll do so. This is a moderated chat, so please feel free to give us all of your thoughts, both good and bad. It is my pleasure to introduce Dave Olinsky, the editor of PresentationXpert and an award-winning writer. His new book, Master Presenter, Lessons from the World's Top Experts on Becoming a More Influential Speaker, was just released. You can order it on Amazon or through a link on our website. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to Dave. Dave.
Thanks, Sharon, and welcome everyone to today's webinar. I am very pleased to introduce our presenter, Nolan Haims. After careers in the theater and the circus, Nolan moved into the world of presentations, creating presentations for Fortune 500 CEOs, leading financial institutions, and all the major television networks. Most recently, Nolan was a vice president at Edelman, the world's largest PR firm, where he oversaw presentation and visual communications. Nolan is now an independent consultant, working with clients across industries to improve their presentations, visual communications, and new business pitches. He also blogs at presentyourstory.com. And with that, Nolan, I will turn it over to you.
And thank you, Dave, very much. Thank you, Sharon. So we're going to dive in here. I should say definitely send your questions as we go through these. Sharon is going to be moderating those, and she'll jump in whenever there's an appropriate question on top of some polls we'll do. So you know, I've heard it said that the only reason to give a presentation is to change the world. I've also heard a lot of lofty advice about the ideal presentation that includes 10 slides, 5 words, and lots of pictures of guys climbing mountains or kids with lemonade stands. And today, hate to break it to you, but we're not going to be talking about changing the world. What we are going to be talking about are hardened, battle-tested techniques for making better presentations more efficiently. Now, before I tell you a bit about me and where I come from, I just want to get a sense, who creates presentations for other people? How many people, you know, create them for clients or bosses or colleagues or even for themselves in situations where they might present themselves, but then they also have to give it to a sales force or somebody else to continue presenting at other times?
We have a poll open, and we're going to ask people to respond. We've got about 68% of you that have responded. Overwhelmingly, we've got 84% that says I do. So let's give it another 15, 20 seconds, and we will share the results.
Great. So now we also asked a question at the beginning. Not everybody was here for that, but the question was, how many people ever find themselves wanting to do the right thing with presentation, but they're thwarted by those clients, those bosses, or just the situation? We can leave that as a rhetorical for now, because about 2/3 of people did. Okay, so it looks like we've got about 83% do create presentations for other people. Doesn't surprise me. That happens in the world of presentation. And we also had about 2/3 of the people that said they were thwarted. So that's really good. I'm guessing that's why you're here, and that means you and I are very much alike. To tell you a bit about myself and to continue what Dave said, to explain a little bit more, believe it or not, I was a professional magician, juggler, and circus performer. I performed in Russia with the Moscow Circus when I was 14 and won international magic competitions. Then I spent a decade as a theater director and playwright, writing and telling stories on stage in New York and around the country. You can see that's my good New York Times review that I'm still proud of. So maybe it gives you a bit of an indication of where I'm coming from. For others, maybe it scares the hell out of you, wondering what I could possibly tell you about corporate presentation. But as Dave said, for the last 5 years and up until just this last Friday, I was the Director of Presentation and Visual Communications for Edelman. It's a company you may not have heard of, but they are the world's largest public relations firm. And much of what I was in charge of there was new business. While I was there, we grew by 64% globally. So we were pretty good at winning pitches with good presentations. In the agency world, if you haven't worked in it, you're always pitching for the next job, and there's never enough time to do it. Often the content continues to be written in the cab ride over to the client, so we were forced to get very efficient in how we create presentations. There was never the luxury of time. And yet we had to keep raising the bar to be competitive, so we couldn't just be pushing out PowerPointy slides with endless bullet points. So how do you create effective, top-notch presentations in the face of these challenges? I've created 3 scenarios today that I'm going to guess you've all encountered at one time and that stand in the face of creating effective presentations and decks. I tend to pack a lot of information in my session, so I'm going to dive right in with our first scenario. I can always tell when a presentation was designed by a print designer who disdains PowerPoint. I can tell because when I open the file, I find single-page JPEGs that were clearly designed in Adobe and then imported into PowerPoint. I'm sure some of you have encountered that as well. And of course, more often than not, we're being asked to change the header on slide 5 or change this logo. All things being equal, Adobe might be better for creating graphics, but in the real world in which we operate, things aren't equal. And the reason why PowerPoint is so widespread in business is because of the editability that it provides to anyone that touches the file. Some people see this as a negative, but for us, we need to see it as a positive. So I want you to embrace this editability and use it to your advantage. Taking advantage of PowerPoint's live capabilities is something I call designing natively. This is a slide from a presentation that was going to be given in Singapore. Now, because we didn't want to get a call at 2 in the morning asking us to take out those illustrated rings or change the hue because in Singapore, I don't know, turquoise is bad luck. I've heard stranger things. Because of that, the entire slide was built natively in PowerPoint, so each element can be independently adjusted, and people on the ground, even non-designers, could change that. So this looks like it was composited in Photoshop, and while Photoshop was used for a few things, for the most part, this was designed all in PowerPoint, and I'm going to be going in and out of layout mode today to show you basically the guts behind the scenes. So the text is all live. It's just Times New Roman. There's no shame in using Times New Roman. It's been around for a long time for a reason. But then let's start breaking this apart. So we've got an image down in this triangle. It's actually just a full color image imported into a triangle shape, cropped to a triangle, and then colorized right in PowerPoint. We've got another, and then also we've applied some transparency to it as well. We've got another triangle that has more transparency right behind it. We've got these rings, these Copernican rings. Those were created in Photoshop, but then just brought in as a separate layer and transparency applied. This background, again, full color, brought in and colorized. So everything here, again, it might look like Photoshop work, but all this stuff can be done in PowerPoint. And we asked that question up front. I'm glad we did, about who uses Adobe and who doesn't. And the vast majority of you don't. And that's fine, because PowerPoint has gotten so much more powerful, and you can do a lot without Adobe. So that's just one example. I'm going to run through about 5 sort of real quick tips about designing natively. I'm not going to go too far in depth on them, but then I'm going to go back to, again, more detail on more tricks and tips on how to actually create some great things using just PowerPoint. But the first is no custom fonts. Now, the problem with, there are thousands and thousands of fonts in the world. The problem is when you use a sort of what we call a custom or proprietary font, something that doesn't come standard on your computer. It's fine, it works on your computer. The moment you send that file to somebody else, all hell breaks loose, and the text doesn't show correctly, it wraps wrong, and sometimes you don't even know if it's correct or not. Something just seems wonky. So because you're creating presentations for other people to be shown on other computers, other systems, and in other situations, you don't know what kind of fonts they have. So avoid custom fonts. You want to stick with one of the 44 safe PowerPoint fonts that 99% of time every Mac and PC will have. Okay, what are those 44 safe fonts, you ask? Well, my friend Joanna Renval, who's a great designer, created the periodic table of PowerPoints. You can find it at her site, presentationexpert.com/fonts. Here it is. It is a categorized, color-coded, interactive PDF for picking a font, one of these safe fonts. Again, there are 44. You can take a look at here. Definitely urge you to go down and download it. Stay on the safe side. Use one of these. Go download the file, and you'll always be safe. Embedding charts in video. Now, with that last topic about fonts, I'm sure there were one or two people saying, hey, but Nolan, don't you know you can embed your fonts in PowerPoint? Yes, you can embed your fonts. You do not ever want to embed your fonts, though. The PowerPoint function of embedding your fonts is the most buggy function that Microsoft has given us with the program. I guarantee it, you will embed your fonts even if you're able to, because not all are embeddable. One day you'll open up your file, it'll all be corrupted, completely uneditable. You'll have to start from scratch. Trust me on this. Don't test it out. It's just problematic. So don't embed your fonts, but your charts, all your data you want to embed, and the same with your videos. When you copy and paste a chart from Excel onto your PowerPoint slide, you get a little pop-up, right? And you get a few options. One, you can import it as a graphic. You can paste it as a graphic, a picture basically, and that's fine, but that is completely uneditable, so no changes ever. So really know what you're doing on that. You can also link your spreadsheet, which is helpful if you're in a corporate environment where accounting is every week is updating sales figures, and then the salespeople take those figures from a linked file. But you've really got to understand your workflow and be very careful about that. Most of the time, you want to embed your chart, which is one of the options. That throws all the data and the spreadsheet in there so you can edit it anytime. Again, you're creating presentations for other people. They need to be edited, even though you don't think things need to be editable down the road. 2 minutes before the CEO's presentation to the client, a number changes. He's got to be able to change that number. So embed all your charts. There's nothing worse than that warning. Hey, where's the linked file? The other thing with videos, starting with PowerPoint 2010, you can now, the default rather, is to literally embed a video. We've used that term, we've loosely thrown that term around for years, but up until 2010, you only linked a video, which meant you had to bring the video and the PowerPoint file together, and one invariably got lost, and it was a disaster. So the default is to embed, so stick with that. Yes, it'll make your file bigger, but it'll also make your file safer. That video is going to play. You don't have to manage multiple files. Okay. PowerPoint image editing tools have gotten so much better over the last few years that I use Photoshop all the time. I constantly have it open. But I also do a whole lot in PowerPoint because it's quicker, and the bigger thing is it's non-destructive. So you want to take full advantage of that strip of tools at the top of your slide. The remove background, the corrections, the color, the artistic effects, the cropping, the brightness, contrast. That's all stuff you could do in PowerPoint, in Photoshop, but you can also do it in PowerPoint. And as I said, it's non-destructive. So at any time you get to the place and you put it up on the screen and you realize, oh, this projector is much brighter than I thought, and now I brighten my image too much, I need to bring it back. I need to reduce the brightness on the image. Fine, no problem. You can do it on the fly. Whereas if you had done that in Photoshop, it'd be a little more difficult to do. So take advantage of all those tools. They've gotten more powerful. Recolor, you saw in the Singapore slide that I'd recolored an image. do your recoloring in PowerPoint. It works really, really well. You can recolor it to anything. And one of the reasons I do recolor images, or at the very least make them black and white a lot, is to make disparate images from different locations, different sources, feel like a family. And that's really important, so your presentation doesn't feel like it's been put, like a Franken-deck is a term we use a lot, like it's pulled from 10 different places and these images came from all different places. Sometimes, you know, making all the images black and white or colorizing them can help. But here's a quick pro tip within PowerPoint. So the image at the top is the full color image. At the bottom, I just colorized it to purple. And that's good, but you can sometimes get better results and different results if instead of recolorizing it, you turn the image black and white, and then you take a transparent color box, like I did at the top, and just place it over the image. And then you can play with the amount of transparency and sort of get different colors. But another cool thing you can do on the bottom, you see I've applied actually a gradient to that color, or to that box. So again, just you can do a whole lot in PowerPoint if you just get a little creative. If you design templates, and anybody that knows me knows that I'm not a huge fan of templates. They have a place, but I usually don't start designing a template when I start designing a presentation. But if you are designing templates, use as many PowerPoint elements as possible. It reduces file size, it maintains editability, it keeps things as crisp as possible. This was a template that I was sent years ago, and I was asked to make some changes to it. But it was all built as one big JPEG, the underlying template. So I had to rebuild it. I couldn't make that change. And let me show you. So this is what I was sent, and this was what I built. Hopefully you didn't see any change, but I'll show you exactly what I did to it. All those boxes and everything, no reason to do that in Photoshop. These are all just built right in PowerPoint. So if in the future the client changes their logo or tweaks it, you can just swap the logo out. If this image doesn't work, you can swap the image out. If the line is too thin because of a projector issue, you can thicken it up right there. I even applied a gradient to a line. You can do that. Obviously the text is all live. So if you're creating templates, try to do as much of your design, or at the very least the final build, directly in PowerPoint. Okay, let's talk about logos for a moment. I know we're all from, you know, lots of different industries and things, but how many people tend to use a lot of logos?
It's interesting, Nolan. It's kind of been in the 2/3 realm. We've got about 44% of the people who have voted. So I think that would be, we should hear back from them shortly. While we're waiting, we did have a question that came up. Can you tell folks what version of PowerPoint you're using?
I'm actually running off of a Mac version 2011. So that's why it looks probably a little bit different to you if you've only been on a PC. But it's for any people who are cross-platform out there or thinking about getting a Mac. With 2011, the versioning has gotten very close to each other, meaning it used to be like Mac and PC worked very differently, and you had to always watch out for certain things. If you created it on a Mac, it wouldn't really look right on a PC. But they've really done away with that. About 99% of things are identical back and forth. So I'm very comfortable, you know, designing on a Mac and handing it off to a PC.
I'm going to close the poll at this time, and let me share the results. And I think it's stayed pretty true. 66% do use a lot of logos, and 34% don't. Okay,
cool. So it doesn't surprise me. In what I do, we go logo crazy. Almost every deck I create, there's dozens and dozens of logos. I have a collection of thousands of logos we're constantly pulling from. Logos, and even some graphic elements too, which we'll talk about in a bit, go for a transparent PNG over a JPEG. Now, I know some of you probably know the difference between the two, but if you don't, a JPEG can be high res, but that's generally a typical format for snapshots and image and pictures and photos of people and places and things like that. A PNG is going to be a little higher. The size of it is going to be a little bigger. It's going to take up more kilobytes, but it's going to be better for use here for logos and similar art that's like logo. Now, a JPEG is what's called a lossy format, which means in order to get it down to a small size, which is one of the goals of a JPEG, it compresses it. By compressing it, it kicks out all this information, these pixels, that it decides, oh, they don't really need those pixels. And that's fine initially, but as you save a JPEG over and over and over, and that's what happens if you're putting these images in PowerPoint, as you save it over and over and over, it's going to start to get blurry, pixelated, fragmented, or some people call it JPEG-y. And I'm sure you've all seen this. A PNG, on the other hand, while a little larger in file size, is what is a lossless format. As you save it over and over, it's not going to degrade in the way that a JPEG does. So for logos where you have really fine detail and not a lot of colors, that when it kicks out that information and it starts to degrade, it's going to become much more noticeable. And the last thing you want is your own logo, or worse, your client's logo, being all blurry and pixelated in a presentation. So you want to try to use PNGs. Now, the other reason to use PNGs, there we go. The other reason to use PNGs is because they're transparent, or they have the ability to be transparent. So a JPEG has to be rectangular. There has to be, information, a background. A PNG can be transparent, and that's what we want with logos. This is what we used to call a logo barf slide. Did these all the time. Just slap them all up there, hopefully align them. And that's fine when you're over white like this. But the moment we want to swap in a new background, maybe try something a little different, make our Franken deck, pull this into another presentation, this is what we get. And you can clearly see all those white boxes, those are JPEGs. Now you can see I've used that remove background tool or make transparent color in PowerPoint on like the Jim Beam, the Dove logo. It doesn't work so well. It works okay with some things, but it doesn't work so well always with logos, and that looks worse than the white box. Now you've got the Unilever and the AstraZeneca. Those were brought in as PNGs, and they will work over any background. So yet another reason, as I save this file over and over, they're not going to degrade. They'll work over any background. They're fine. So I get asked a lot where to find logos. Can I just pull them from Google? Isn't that easy? I can find it in 2 seconds. You can, but here's my reason not to pull from Google. This was a very simple document that was sent to a client, very not controversial. And the person just pulled a bunch of logos from Google. They were in a big rush, and they threw in the Starbucks logo. They did a Google search for it, threw it in there. And fortunately, this did not go as is to the client. We caught it because it's probably too small for you to see, but I'm going to make it a little bit bigger. The Starbucks logo that they grabbed is not the real Starbucks logo. It's actually a parody logo that, for whatever reason, came up in the search results very quickly at the top. So again, we caught this. It didn't go to the client, but could have been a little embarrassing. So that's one reason you don't want to just pull stuff from Google. Okay, where do you find logos? One of my favorite sites is Brands of the World. There are about 5 or 6 other similar sites, but this I think probably has the most there. So you can pull stuff from there. You can pull them down as EPS format, which you can, if that's all you have, you can put that into PowerPoint. We'll talk more about that in a second. Wikipedia also is getting better and better. If you've got big companies, here for example, the Adobe logo, they have it as a PNG already. No conversion, no Photoshop necessary, and it even has it up to 2,000 pixels, if you can see there. So you can choose whatever size you want, and it's the official logo. So look at Wikipedia, look at Brands of the World, try to avoid Google if you possibly can. Although if you are searching there, I believe maybe it's Bing, some of the search engines allow you to filter by type, so filter by PNG at the very least and try to avoid those JPEGs. Okay.
Nolan, let me just break in here.
Yeah, sure.
Timo had a great website for everyone. It's iconsdb.com. It's a great place to get icons and some of the most popular brand logos, just as a resource for everyone out there.
Fantastic.
I'll put it in chat so everybody has it.
Okay, great. IconDB, I actually didn't know about that. There are a lot of sites. The Noun project is really good for icons as well. But yeah, there's a lot out there. Thanks. Okay, so you said, great, thanks for the information on JPEGs versus PNGs, but Nolan, you promised me tricks, and I need my tricks to make my presentation. So here we go. The first is gradient boxes. This is one of my absolute favorite techniques in PowerPoint. All it is a semi-transparent gradient box that fades from one color, one solid color, to nothing. And we use them all the time. I use them in almost every presentation I'm working on for a number of different purposes. And you can see here I outline them in red. I put them over a grid background so you can see exactly what they are. Incredibly easy to create. You just go into image options and fill, make a gradient from 1 to the X. Very simple to do. Let me show you them in action. They come in really handy with full screen imagery like this slide right here. Now this slide is good, but it doesn't quite work in terms of color, and the main reason is there's not enough contrast. The navigation bar at the top and accountability for learning, it's blending into the background just a bit too much. And it's not terrible, but there's not enough contrast. It doesn't, I hate this word, but I'm going to use it anyway. That text doesn't pop. Yeah, I'm sure we've all heard that from clients. So let me show you the finals, and I'll show you what I did using gradient boxes and some other tricks. So this is our fixed slide, and you can see that there's much more contrast, and the text really comes to life, and it's more dimensionalized on that front. So I'm going to go into slide layout mode here. So I did a few things. First thing was the top was getting lost, so I put a gradient box in at the top, and you can see that it is just a gradient box. It goes from, this one doesn't even go to 100% black, because that's another great thing about this. I think it goes from about 70% black down to 0%. And you can play with this. That's the great thing. Instead of going to Photoshop, on the fly, you can bring it up, you can bring it down. If I had another row of icons of navigation, I might have to bring it down more. You can play with it. It's flexible on the fly. I also put one over here, going horizontally, okay? So again, you can play with this. You can bring it out all the way over here, and once it starts to maybe darken the boy a little too much, I bring it back. And again, I don't think this one goes completely to 100% black, but that can be really useful as well. So you can see those are the two gradient boxes I used. I did one other thing here. You'll notice that there's also some shading down at the bottom here and sort of throughout. I put what's called a vignette over this entire image. And you can see it here. It's a PNG that I brought in from Photoshop. More about that in a moment. But I bring vignettes over full-scale imagery, and even imagery that's not full-scale, almost all the time. Vignetting is an old technique, that goes back to almost the dawn of photography, but it's kind of experiencing a renaissance right now with Instagram and things like that. It's a way simply to give an image more depth. And it's, don't know exactly why, but it works. So here we have, I just deleted the vignette, and I'm going to bring it back. It just gives, it kind of blurs out the outside and the edges and makes the focus of the image come to life a little more. So that's vignettes, and I'll tell you how to get a hold of vignettes in a second. Now I did one last thing here that you might have noticed, might not have noticed, and that was the image used to be standard. This was the old one, right? It didn't stretch all the way across. It didn't fill our widescreen page, but here it does. Now, how did I do that? This is the original image. Okay, again, you can see the vignettes off. How do I make it stretch across? If I just go in, and I know we've all seen this happen, if I do this, that doesn't really cut it. We've now stretched our person, and it doesn't really work. You can, honestly, you can stretch an image like this, maybe 5%, depending on the subject matter, maybe 10% without people noticing, but anything more than that, it's going to start to look distorted, and we don't want that. So I could easily go in Photoshop and stretch it out, but we don't have Photoshop, right? The 2/3 of us that don't, or even more. So what do? We're going to take the image, and we're going to duplicate it. So I now have a second image. Okay, let's try that again. There we go. I have a second image right on top. I'm going to go up to my format picture. Again, it looks a little different because I'm on a Mac. And I'm going to crop in on this new version of the image just past the fingertips. I'm going to bring this back up. And now this abstract part of the wall, nobody's going to ever know that that was stretched. So we stretch that out. We send it to the back. Oops. I have a second one there somehow. Oh, sorry. There we go. I got my layering messed up a little bit there. There we go. So this is now the second part, and that abstract wall stretched, voila. Photoshop just using PowerPoint. And honestly, I do this a lot. Again, I always have Photoshop up, but sometimes it's just easier to do it in PowerPoint. You can do this with sky, with sand, with abstract parts of walls, anything that doesn't have people in it, and usually people won't be able to know the difference. Remember that image I showed right up front? Just waiting for it to kick in. Sharon, do I have my mountain climber up again?
Your mountain climber is in. I see him with a blue screen
there he goes.
To the left.
Okay, great. I just had a little lag on my end. Just want to make sure I got back. So remember this image? Well, this was what I had downloaded from a stock site. It wasn't widescreen. I simply applied that trick I just did, threw the vignette on it, and now we can change the world. So I use black boxes a lot, dark boxes, but you can also use white ones as well. This was a print slide. It was never meant to be put up on screen, so don't ask me about the amount of text. But in this case, I used a white vignette box to eliminate that hard edge that we see a lot. And I'm never a big fan of slides that kind of look like this, so I like using little white gradient boxes to just fade right away to the page. So that's a technique we use all the time, especially in print like this. Okay, so if you have any questions, just toss them out there. But and I can come back. But I'm gonna move on to vector graphics and the difference between vector and raster. Again, I know some people might know this, but a raster image is like a JPEG. It's a snapshot. It's made up of pixels. A vector graphic is simply made up of mathematical information. And the best example is a billboard. If you get really close to a billboard, you'll see, let's say, a photo of a person, and it's really blurry, and you see the pixels. That's because that's a raster image, and there's just so many pixels that the camera was able to capture realistically and then print. But from afar, it doesn't matter. But the text on a billboard, you'll notice, is crisp and razor sharp. That's because text is almost always vector. No matter how big you make it, you can scale it up and down, it's always going to remain crisp because it's just mathematical information when they're printing. It just says, make the lines this length and this angle and this color and print it. Now, in PowerPoint, you have vector imagery and you have raster imagery. Snapshots you bring in, that's raster. What's vector? All your text. What's vector? Shapes, triangles, squares, lines, anything, all those geometric shape tools that you can bring in. But we want to try to use even more vector graphics. Whenever you have a choice in PowerPoint, use vector graphics. So what are some examples? Well, here's a vector graphic. I could have brought this in as a PNG, but I never do because I know I'm going to have to recolor some countries. I'm going to have to do something to this. And if you do not already have one of these vector maps, world maps on your desktop in your collection, you need to get one. And I'll give you one. So just hang on a minute or so, and I'll tell you where you can download one of these. So with this, and again, the type of work I do is I'm constantly using maps. You can go in here and you can recolor maps all day long. You can remove countries if you need to just focus on Africa. I can delete everything else. You can make all these changes, and it scales up and down. It'll print perfectly. No problem. I can add gradients, I can add shadows, whatever I want to do. So gradient map is super helpful. What are some other examples of vector graphics? Icons. I use them all the time. Icons really helpful when you're trying to visually communicate something. We want to try to use less text in our presentations, and icons can really help. So here we've got 2 sets of icons that I downloaded from Shutterstock, which is my favorite stock site. If you're looking for one, go there. Now the one on the left is PNG. It's fine. And you can see if I sort of pull it over here, you can see that it's transparent. And PNGs are okay. They're fine, but you can't do that much with them. You can't recolor them. If you start to make them really big, they're going to degrade. So over here, I brought them in as .emf. And that is so what I'm going to do here, I'm just going to delete all of these for a moment for the sake of demonstration. So this clipboard here is simply made up of PowerPoint shapes. And I can recolor it to my heart's content. I can do anything I want with it. I could even delete, you can see it's in parts. I could even delete part of it if I wanted to. So that's why when you're using icons, you want to bring them in as EMFs as you can. Now, the way to do that, you do need Illustrator for this or a comparable program. You simply open up the vector file and you export as .emf, and that stands for Enhanced Meta File. It's a Windows format. And once you bring that into PowerPoint, you're golden. You do have to bring it in on a PC. If you bring it in on a Mac, it won't ungroup and you won't have all the options. I should point out you can bring in to PowerPoint EPS files, but in my opinion, they don't work nearly as well as EMFs. But if you have a designer friend, if you have access to Illustrator, try to get your icons in .emf format. So again, why do we want...
There are a couple questions. I hate to interrupt you there, but one of the questions is, can you import a .ai file? And if so, how do you do it?
I do not believe that PowerPoint accepts AI. In fact, I'm 99% certain it doesn't. Because that's an Adobe format. EPS is a more flexible format. So you can import .eps files into PowerPoint, and then try ungrouping them in order to. Sometimes when you bring them in, you have to ungroup them in order to work with them. But again, why do we want our icons and everything as editable as possible? Because like this slide, for example, we had gone through, we color-coded the whole thing and, spent days on that. And then at the last minute, the client said, color coding's not working for me. Just make them all gray. Oh, great. Okay. Well, they're all gray. With one click, instead of going back to the designer, instead of going back to Photoshop, instead of playing around with the colorization thing to try to get the exact shade of gray or whatever we wanted, they're in there. So you want, again, I'm just going to keep saying it, you want your files as flexible as possible. All right, so I've talked about vignettes, gradients, vector maps, and other stuff. Where can you get these if you don't have access? Well, you can get them on my website. If you go to presentyourstory.com and you subscribe at the top left, in your thank you email, you'll get a link to a goodies page on the site that you can download various goodies, including the vignettes I talked about, the gradient shapes, some icons, some various things, the vector maps, US maps, world maps. Go there, all for free. Just take them down and use them in good health. You do have to subscribe to it to get to that page, though. But I don't send out emails that often, so don't worry about it. It won't flood your inbox. Okay, next scenario. Moving on. I'm sure we've heard this a lot, right? We don't want it to look like our bosses, our clients don't want things to look like PowerPoint. How do you make things not look PowerPoint-y, right? We don't want that 1990s stereotypical Microsoft deck with lots of bullet points, okay? Lots of techniques for this, but my favorite by far is something I call chunking. And this is something I, again, probably use in almost every single deck I touch, because almost every single deck I get has bullet points. And if we can avoid it, I'm going to avoid bullet points. So this is a slide. I'm sure we've all been given a slide like this at some point in our lives and had no idea what to do with it, right? You look at it, and even I suffer from this. It's something I call bullet point freeze. You get a slide full of bullet points and you just freeze up. You're like, I don't know what to do. It is what it is, and moving on. Maybe I'll make a fancy template frame, or maybe I'll add an image. But you want to really work with your content, design your content in a more visual way. And if we took this and we chunked it out, it looks less like PowerPoint. So again, what is chunking? Chunking is taking a vertical list of bullet points and changing it on the page so that it becomes horizontal and visual. So anytime we have vertical bullet points, move them on the page horizontally. Now in this case, I added some imagery, which helps, added logos, which helps, and also we had kind of 2 rows as well. This is chunking out, and suddenly it becomes far less PowerPoint. It becomes layout, it becomes design, it becomes visual communication, much more than just text. I'll show you a simpler case. All right, this isn't terrible, but there's not much going on, and it is just text. How do we turn this, no Photoshop necessary, into a chunked visual slide? Easy, okay? The eye wants to read horizontally before it wants to read vertically. It's much easier for us. It's much easier for our brains to process. So whenever possible, we want to move the eye horizontally on the page, not have them constantly going vertically down, 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 down. And that's when we start to get scared as an audience member, thinking, oh, I don't want to get through all this text. I don't want to read it all. This makes it go down much easier. Almost anything can be chunked out on a page. Any series of information in bullet points. This, easy. No design degree necessary. Okay. Even if you have a lot of content, like these core competencies here, again, you can just chunk it out. And while I don't expect anybody to remember all this content here, just the fact of it being chunked out in 3 columns makes it go down a little easier, makes it seem less PowerPointy. Okay. We're going to ask another question at this point, and then I'll also take questions on anything I've talked about up till now. But who uses PowerPoint for presentations that are just printed and or primarily printed and never really meant to be put up on a screen? And I should point out that there's no, it's a good thing. There's no shame in saying, oh, I just use PowerPoint for print, because with the way things are going right now, PowerPoint is becoming a layout tool, and I use it all the time for print. So it's an incredibly valid use of PowerPoint. Don't think that PowerPoint equals on-screen slideshow. Okay. So it looks like we're coming in.
Yes, so we have a lot of people answering the poll, so we will share the results in a couple minutes. We have tons of questions.
Oh,
so,
let me take a couple.
Okay. Nolan, do you post examples of your presentations on SlideShare?
I do not. I have a SlideShare account, and lots of people follow me, but I've never put anything up there. Maybe I will. It's just, honestly, is not part of my my workflow right now. That might change in the future. I do have a few examples up on nolanhaims.com, and certainly on my blog, Present Your Story, I show actual slide examples from things that I've created. But no, thank you. Maybe in the future it's something I need to get on.
We have about 82% of the people that are voted. Let me give you another question. Okay. One of the things that people were asking is to get a little bit more information about some of the vector graphics. Mm-hmm. And where did you download the vector graphics from, number one? Mm-hmm. And number two, the other question is, what are the advantages between bringing it in as an EMF and not WMF?
I'll go backwards. The WMF is an older format, and you're not going to get the you're going to get basically fewer vector points. EMF is just going to give you smoother vectors. It's just better results. You're not going to notice it if you bring a square in, but if you start bringing in circles and curves, you'll notice the difference between the two. So use EMF. And I get most of my stock imagery from Shutterstock.com. I feel like I'll give a plug to them because they are great. And I love their subscription model where you pay a yearly or a monthly and you get 25 images a day, vector and raster. I get so much from there. They're really top notch. So that's what I like. But you can also get them from iStock, from ThinkStock, from also, any big stock. All the stock houses have vector art.
Terrific. I'm going to share the poll results,
Okay.
and you will find 40% do and 60% don't. So that kind of gives you an idea of where we go. Before we continue on, we've had a couple of questions about chunking. Can you go back to the last example of chunking, and how did you make the chunking happen again?
Sure. Sorry if I went over that a little quickly. Let me go back. So this one, how did I make it happen? It's literally, instead of having one big text box, just create 3 text boxes. Or actually, this one in front of you now could actually be done with PowerPoint's column function in a text box. Not a lot of people know, but you can have a big text box and set columns. So once you get to the bottom of one, it kicks all your information back to the top, to the second column, to the third. But in this case, I'm sure I just did 3 individual text boxes, and that's it. I mean, it means you're going to have more text boxes on your page by chunking, but who cares? The point is your audience and your communication. Did I kind of answer that?
I definitely think you did answer that,
Okay.
which there's a kind of follow-up question
Sure.
to that. With bringing .emf graphics into PowerPoint, do you have to export from Illustrator on a PC or just import into PowerPoint on a PC to get them to break apart?
Great question. You can export from Illustrator on Mac or PC, doesn't matter, which is in fact my workflow. When I do that, I'm on my Mac, I export it from Illustrator because it's my primary computer, then I go to a PC and bring them in. I mean, you can actually bring them in on the Mac, but then to ungroup them in order to color them and change this, delete parts of it or change your edit points, you need to do that on a PC. There is, I don't want to get too far into this, but if anybody uses Keynote in their workflow and they're on a Mac and they go back and forth between PowerPoint and Keynote, email me. I actually have a workflow where I export Illustrator to Keynote, convert Keynote to PowerPoint, and then bring editable shapes into PowerPoint, and that actually gives you even better results than the EMF. It's a multi-step process requiring a third-party plugin that's free, but once you get down in that workflow, it's pretty incredible. It's a way to create all your shapes in Illustrator and then get them into PowerPoint. But I do want to go on because I know I'm running a little behind.
That's okay. Keep going. Let's keep it going.
Okay. So we had about 40% say they do use PowerPoint for print, and I imagine in the coming years, some of the other 60%, you're going to be finding reasons to use PowerPoint. Again, don't think of it as just a screen tool. Think of it as a layout tool, and more Microsoft is realizing that people are using it for print, and I have to imagine in the next few releases they're going to give you more print tools. So we're talking about now, sort of this section we're in, about things that will make your presentation not look like a generic PowerPoint. And one of the biggest reasons that most presentations look the same is that they're trying to be all things to all people in all situations, right? This sort of the slide you mint, the deck that's supposed to work in print, on a monitor, by email, on a tablet, right? We always want that magical deck. It doesn't work that way. Think of a presentation, PowerPoint file, as large screen, presented on a big screen projector or LCD, or printed. One or the other. Really don't try to merge the two of them. And so those are the sort of the two main styles that I kind of worked in for years, but a couple years ago, we started seeing a need for a third type of presentation, which you may not have thought about, but maybe you will now. And that third type of presentation was for CEOs and C-suite people that they didn't want to be presented to on a large screen. It's too formal, and by the way, there are only a couple people in the room with them anyway, so it seems weird. And they didn't want to print a 40-page printed document because they don't have the time to read 40 pages. They wanted to literally be walked through a presentation, a proposal by a client very easily. And that is where we kind of came up with the walking deck. And by we, I mean sort of the universe, or it wasn't just us. Walking deck is a term, I didn't come up with it. It's also called a lap deck sometimes. You might hear that. And what a walking deck is, kind of a hybrid between large screen and printed. And it can be varying. It has varying levels of detail. It can have bullet points and full sentences, so it's not strictly a document. It's not strictly on screen. It can be portrait or landscape. I like doing portrait styles, and you'll see in a second. You want to think of a walking deck as a car brochure. Now, I don't know if they're actually still doing these if you go to a car dealership, but you used to sit down with the dealer, and he would bring out the car brochure and walk you through it. And he'd show you 4 bullet points about, you know, the awards they won, and he'd show you a graphic of the engine and a beauty shot of the car going around a mountain. And then he'd say, okay, here's 8 paragraphs on the warranty. You can read that part at home. And so it was varying levels of detail. Some you would read with the person next to you, some you would take home with you. And at the end, he'd hand you the whole thing, and you take it home. So here's how these work. Here's an example of one that was presented to a CEO just by one person. They sat next to them, and they paged through it. This was created in PowerPoint, in Portrait. And the reason I like doing them in Portrait is because it gets people out of PowerPoint think, right? Suddenly, when things aren't landscape and looking like a slide, suddenly people are like, oh, I don't need a header and bullet points. I just have a document that I'm creating. And that's exactly what it is. So, so that's a walking deck. Now, but to sort of circle back to print decks, which also can be portrait or landscape, but again, we like doing them portrait because it gets people out of PowerPoint think. There's nothing greater than giving your proposal to a client, and you hand it to them and they say, oh, thank God you didn't do PowerPoint. Thank God you didn't give me a PowerPoint. Well, yeah, that's exactly how I created it, but I'm not going to tell you that. It's wonderful because it lets you show up differently. So, so a portrait print deck, let me show you a couple of examples of this, and don't adjust your monitors. These are intentionally blurred out just because I have to. But you get the idea, right? This is looks like something that you might think was designed in InDesign. Definitely not Word. We try to stay away from Word. We were actually, this was a case where the person said, oh, I just need something in Microsoft Word, and we said, we're not working in Word. It's a disaster. I don't want to spend my evening changing the margin and figuring out why my image is falling off the page and the page number's not working. So we do PowerPoint instead of Word, and we produce things like this. So don't discount PowerPoint when you have a printed document. And if you're struggling with Microsoft Word, like everybody does, just trying to insert an image or a background, think about going to PowerPoint. Here are a few other things that you can do sort of easily, or sometimes easily, but things you can do differently with PowerPoint. So we're gonna start to hack PowerPoint to create things that it wasn't intended to create. And the first is a spread deck. Now, these can be portrait or landscape, but this is something that was recently done as portrait print, in just like a magazine. That's what we mean when we say spread. And this was designed as a magazine. It was always meant to be seen digitally. We were going to put it up on a website and sort of a flipbook thing. But at the very last minute, they said, you know, it looked so good. They said, oh, let's just print it as a real magazine. So we actually did. And this was created in PowerPoint. Now, it's not ideal. You know, it would have been a lot easier in InDesign, but this kind of thing is possible. But if you don't want to get that complicated, you can stay with slides. You can stay in landscape. And this is just a really cool thing to do to show up differently. This I did for a client, and they didn't want to put anything up on screen. They just wanted to hand something and, you know, to the board members and have them easily flip through. So created in PowerPoint, but you can see, you know, there are 4 slides here. You can see how the content flows from one page to the next. Exactly the kind of thing that you would see in a magazine using InDesign, but you can do this in PowerPoint. It takes a little extra effort, but sometimes you need to take a little extra effort. And here's a sort of behind-the-scenes view of a real print deck that we did as a square. This was sent to a printer. We even put in the crop and bleed marks here. Again, we're hacking it to make it work like InDesign. You can see imagery bleeds from one slide to the next. It was a little complicated, but we had a really good printer who just took the PDF and sliced off the edges, and we had imagery and everything bleeding to the edge. And it was great. And it also meant that our client could edit this at whenever he wanted. You know, we had a 24-hour turnaround with the printer, but they could take it home at night and they could edit the copy. They didn't, you know, they didn't have to sit over our shoulder. It was great. Even if you're not doing a bleed deck, just think about printing your presentation on cardstock, on double-sided on cardstock. We do that. I do that a lot of the time just to make something feel weightier. If you ever have like a 15-page presentation, you're like, it feels really flimsy, and the client's going to think I didn't do a lot of work. Just print it on cardstock, and you can also print it double-facing sided here, and looks more professional. All done in PowerPoint. No Adobe needed. Okay, moving on. So I've read all the presentation books, and they all say never hand out your slides as a takeaway, right? Design a separate, detailed handout. That's great idealistic advice, but we're in the real world. And if we ask the question now, I'm sure I know what the answer would be. How many people regularly have the opportunity to design a completely separate handout that complements your screen presentation? I'm sure almost nobody. I know that I don't. I don't have time to create two different presentations. Now, some of you might be saying, okay, but hey, PowerPoint lets you easily create handouts with notes view. And that is true. These come courtesy of Rick Altman, who has also done a webinar. I'm sure he'll be doing some future ones. He's great. He's fantastic. These are some traditional uses of the notes view that allow you to create handouts, basically, with, as you can see, either with little thumbnails of the slides or without. And this is good if you have the time to do it. But my problem with the traditional use of this is it still feels like a completely separate document that needs to be designed. And business people, corporate world, the agency world, freak out when you tell them you're going to design two different documents. If the content is changing up to the few minutes before, they don't want to create two different documents. They're going to say, just print my slides. I don't care. I've heard it constantly. Therefore, we had to come up with a solution that allows you to have a distinctly different handout than what is shown on screen without having a separate layout or really having a separate deck or anything. And what we came up with was the magical 2-in-1 deck. And this actually uses the notes view, but it uses it in a slightly different way. Here's what it looks like. These are the on-screen slides, okay? Not a lot of text, good imagery. These are good on-screen slides. But what happens when somebody wants to see the deck and they weren't in the presentation, or they want to take it away and they want to hear what you said? They want to refresh their memory. Then we get the handout that looks like this. That takes a big thumbnail of the slide with a sidebar over on the right that's designed minimally, but it's designed. It feels like it was meant to be. This is the notes view, just designed in a different way. Here's how it works. We've all seen this, right? This is the standard notes page view. It's a snooze. It looks like you're lazy if you just hand this out to somebody, given your speaker notes. But what you probably don't know is you can design this using Notes Master View. This is a designed Notes Master View. You can have it be portrait or landscape. In this case, I made it landscape. And enter header title there. That's my slide. And on the right, that gray box is the speaker notes. So you ask your client or whoever to just type in the speaker notes as usual in layout mode like they normally do. Then when you're ready, you just go View Notes Page, and automatically they get formatted that way. And you can further go into it like we did, and we made the heads blue. You can go further on a slide-by-slide basis and design those. So that's one deck. So on screen, you don't see that sidebar, but when you go to make a PDF, when you go to print it out, and if you're sending a presentation to somebody, you should always send a PDF, by the way, you get this. And the client, your team member, your boss, or whoever, only has to think about one single file, one single presentation, but you get two decks in one. So I'm doing that right now for a client, and they're loving it. So because it allows them to put less text on screen, which should always be a goal of ours. Okay, I'm getting towards the end, and I'll go through this quick. This is one of my favorite tricks for having less stuff on screen, and again, having a slightly different version of your deck when you print than what's seen up there. So this is a very basic slide. This slide has a page number on it. Now you can't see it now because I'm in slideshow mode. Let me show you another slide that not only has a page number, but it has a very big footnote, and you're not seeing it. That's because we've applied the magical disappearing. Let's go back. Okay, we're going to go back here. And now I'm going to show you, so I'm in slideshow mode. Now I'm going to go out of slideshow mode into layout mode. And we've got our page number, so which somehow we all miss the big old honkin' pink page number. On the next slide, we've got the big old page number, and here was our footnote. So how did I do this? Through animation, and I know this animation panel is going to look very foreign to our PC friends out there, but basically what I did was, and I did this in the master, not on a slide-by-slide basis, to the page number, I applied first an appear animation. After previous, it says, you know, this placeholder appears, and then it disappears immediately. So what's happening now when you go to the slide, when the transition happens, PowerPoint, the page number's not there. Then once the slide renders, the animation, the page number comes in instantly and then instantly goes out. And it happens so quickly, literally, it never pops up on the screen. You don't even get a strobe effect. Now you can do this to anything. You can, as I said, you can do it in the master, or you can do it on, this was done right on the slide. And you can see I had two things going on here. I've got both these things coming in, I've got both of them coming out. So I hate page numbers on the screen, but when you print something out, when you make a PDF, they're kind of useful. You can also put your logo bugs, your company logo. I hate seeing logos constantly, you know, on the screen. It's like, yeah, I know who you are. I'm about to hire you, or you're my client. But when you print something out, sometimes it's nice to mark your slides so people know who created them. Now you can do this, if you get creative with this, you can do lots of stuff with this little trick. Here is the print version of this slide, all this detailed information that you don't want to put up on screen. But when I go into slideshow mode, that's all they see. And the rest are talking points. They can also be in the speaker notes. So again, it's a great way, it's another version of sort of the two-in-one deck. It's a great way to have something distinctly different on screen than what is what's shown when you print out or when you make a PDF. Sharon, I've got one more thing that I can talk about for 4 minutes or so. Should I go ahead?
I would definitely go ahead. I think people are sticking with us. And also, if they have to leave us at this time, we will make sure that they have a link to the recording and they can hear what they missed. So we have lots of questions as well.
Great. And I will hang around for as long as there are questions. But the last thing I do want to show you is the idea of reskinnable templates. And very often, again, you've heard, I've said that I don't like templates. I think it's a waste of time a lot to create a brand new template, for every single presentation. And a lot of times when you're working in the corporate world as a designer, the first thing they say is, I don't have my content written, make me a template. And it's a futile exercise, in my opinion, when it's not really necessary, because I want to design the content. That's where communication comes in, not in a frame around it. But I do understand that there are certain situations where something kind of has to be branded to a client, has to feel a little different, like you don't just want it on the standard corporate template. So we created reskinnable templates in which you can take a standard base template and reskin it in about a few minutes, and your client thinks you spent all afternoon making a whole template just for them, a whole presentation just for them. Here's how it works. So here's my dummy template. Not very exciting, but is what it is. But you'll notice that there's a lot of blue. There's a lot of colors. Let's say those are the corporate colors for my made-up company here that I'm calling CompuCom. I thought it was made up, and then I Google searched it, and of course there's a company named CompuCom. But this is a little made-up logo. So I'm going to pretend that I work for CompuCom, and this is my base template, and I'm pitching PwC. And I'm using them because I love their new logo, and I love the colors in it. So how would I do this? Well, I'm going to go into our master view, where all these slides are mastered in various different ways. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make a little logo bug. We see this all the time, right? Not a huge fan of this, but people really like it, putting the client's logo next to your company logo. Fantastic. Sometimes they put a little plus in between, like PwC plus CompuCom. But so that's one thing. But the next thing, the thing that'll really sell this to PwC, make them think that we really care about them, is to change the whole color scheme to their color scheme. And we're going to do that by changing our color theme. Now again, this looks a little different on the PC, but it's very possible. We're going to bring out our custom theme colors. And you can see this whole template was created with the CompuCom colors, blues and grays and stuff. But now we're going to change them to PwC. I'm going to go into my accent 1 and change the color. And I can type in, these are the RGB values that I determined were in the PwC here, but I'm going to use a shortcut here just for the sake of time. You can do this in 2013 now on the PC, but not earlier. You get a little color picker here. So I'm going to change the first one to red, PwC red. Great, you see that changes. The second one, I'm going to change to PwC orange. Great. Our third accent is PwC yellow. And I could continue changing the other accents, but I'm not because I don't use those very much in this template. But this whole template was created in varying shades of blue using these accents they were put in. So now watch the magic, and I could even rename this, PwC template. Watch the magic. It now ripples through. If I go into slideshow mode, it ripples through the entire deck. And you'll see I've got the logo there. Now you'll notice a few places I still have that blue. That's because PowerPoint gets cranky sometimes, and sometimes you need to reset the layout to default settings. And now you'll see that all those headers just changed color. It's a little glitch, but not a big deal. So there you go. So in about 3 or 4 minutes, I've just created a template that PwC thinks is all about them. And that's a little, it's a little shortcut, but we used to do it all the time. So if you can create a base template, just as a place, as a starting point, you can always continue going in here and change it more, put a fancy cover page on it, full page, change some layouts and ways that things are working. But if you're a designer, you start with a base template and then work from there. Very often, we've taken these sort of templates and then built upon them so they don't even look like this anymore. But at least it's a place to start. We're not reinventing the wheel, and that's the most important thing. So that's what I've got today. I'm happy to answer any questions. I know I've covered a whole lot. I'm sure you have tons of questions, and I'm happy to answer anything.
Great. I think one of the first things I want to say is we have automagically is a new word I had not heard of before, and I'm going to keep that one in my mind. I like how you brought in your theater and your magic into it. Yes. So it's a great word. How do you check to make sure a video is embedded? So if somebody, basically if somebody sends you a file and you can play the video, it's embedded, because otherwise I don't know where it would be on your computer. I guess probably it's a good technical question. You can probably tell by the size of the file whether it's embedded. Like if you have a 1 meg file and you have a 2-minute video and like you just hop on somebody's computer, or maybe it's on a network drive or something. There are some more detailed ways, like you could unzip the folder, you could zip your PowerPoint file and unzip it to get all the source files inside of it. I'm getting very wonky now, and you'll see if the video's there. But generally, if somebody sends it to you, there's no other place the video could be except, and in the file. It's not on your desktop. I hope that answered it. I think it definitely does. Another question from Janet. Can you colorize clip art?
Yeah, well, okay, we have to define clip art. Because clip art can be sort of a catch-all phrase for any, imagery or whatever. So if you just find a JPEG of something that you call clip art online and you bring it in, you'll only be able to recolor it the way you would recolor photos, make them all purple or something. You're not going to be able to, recolor, parts of it. But I believe, and I don't quote me on this, but I believe if you bring in Microsoft clip art that is graphics, like two-dimensional graphics, like illustrations, I believe those are recolorable, but I'm not sure. I believe those come in just like they would a square or a circle.
You know, and you're right, they do. I've actually had an opportunity to colorize clip art, and that is definitely, there are some fun ways to do it and things you can do with it, and just thinking of it as a picture too really helps as well, especially if it's a Microsoft clip art. So we have a question from Dean. How do you make a picture a geometric shape like you did on the first slide with a triangular shape?
That's a good question. Let's see if I can. There are a few ways to do it, I think. Let's see. Let's go back to this. Let's see if this works. Yeah. So this works slightly different on the PC, but actually a little easier. You can change the type. So let's just insert an image into a square, or just or actually just bring the image in, and then it'll come in as a rectangle. Then you can go and you can change the shape, like I did here. Now on the Mac, it's kind of it's under Format Picture, and here's where I can go and I can change it to sort of. This actually has I can move this triangle. So that's the way to do it. You basically start with a square, and then you can change it to something else. So I believe under, again, I don't have my PC interface up, but I believe in the same way under Format Picture you have shapes, and then that's the way to do it. So you can get pretty creative with that.
Terrific. Since we're kind of talking about the different things, if we can look at your slides 35 through 37, where you had the boy and you were actually moving from behind and adding the gradation.
Yep.
The question is, why did the gradient box over the text make it pop?
Okay, well, it's creating more contrast. So here I've selected both of my, actually I'm going to take out the, I'm going to take all three things out. I have, remember, a gradient box on the top, one on the side, and a vignette over everything. I'm going to delete them. Okay, it's simple contrast. You have a very light text here with the white and the yellow, and you have a very light background, so they're blending into each other. The moment you put something darker behind those, that makes it pop. With presentation, you always want as high contrast as possible, which means you don't want to put light blue text over a medium blue background. You want to put dark text over a light background. And by the way, if you're putting text over an image, I kind of feel like white text always tends to work best as opposed to dark, white or yellow. Just feels better. Basically, any imagery over any text, unless it's like super white out, like a snow scene, try to use white text or yellow as opposed to black. I feel like it pops a little more.
That's terrific. We have a lot of questions, so let me just try and pick a couple that are, I think were really going to help. How do you fix the color glitch again without changing accent colors?
Fix the color glitch?
Yeah, that doesn't make sense. We can skip that question.
Well, without... okay. Maybe if you could clarify that one, we can go on to the next one and come back to that one, maybe.
Okay, terrific. One of the I just want to kind of share with you that we've gotten some great kudos, and people have said in all caps, this is fantastic, it's wonderful. Okay. I want to thank you very much. So one of the things, the next one is, where do you find, I know you use a lot of Shutterstock. Are there other places to find imagery that you would use? Yeah, the two main places are Shutterstock, and then I use Creative Commons a lot. So Creative Commons can be a bit of a minefield, but basically people are becoming better and better amateur photographers, and they're throwing things up on Flickr that other people can use. And they have the choice when they do that of applying a few levels of what's called a Creative Commons license. And they're varying levels. Some levels of it say, hey, anybody can use this image, do whatever they want with. Usually the license is, you can use this image if you give me attribution, and you can't use it in like a national ad campaign. But if you want to use it for a brochure or a presentation or on a website, all you need to do is give me attribution, my name, like, or whatever, down the bottom. And so I use that all the time for presentation. It's great for like location shots. Like if you need a shot of the Eiffel Tower, yeah, you could go on Shutterstock or Getty and pay money for that, or you can just find some amateur photographer took a really great shot, puts it up there for you,
and you just put his, in like light gray type on the very bottom of your slide, hey, John took this image. You get some really good imagery that way. And a good site, you can do a Creative Commons search within Flickr by going to advanced search, but there's also a website called CompFite, C-O-M-P as in Paul, fight.com, and that is just a Creative Commons search. You can also do Creative Commons search with Bing. Bing, by the way, is I think the best image search engine, better than Google for whatever reason. And you can sort by all sorts of things on there.
I think we've got lots of questions. I did get some clarification on the color glitch thing. It was
Sure.
The color glitch thing has to go with changing the accent colors and reskinning or resetting the template.
Oh, right. I'm sorry. Right. So after you do that, for what you just, if this goes for any time you sort of reapply a layout. Like I've got this layout here on slide, well, whatever this, slide 7. Let's say I want to, go and change the layout to look like this. Okay. Now I go in there and, my things are all over the place, and for whatever reason, because it didn't quite match up and my images goes here, if I want to reset that, sometimes PowerPoint just gets confused with what's mastered. You go to Reset Layout to Default Settings. And actually, in this case, because I have so much extra information, let me go back to the original layout. This will be a better demonstration of it. So let's say I move my images and I move this over and I make it bold and whatever, and then I look at it and I'm like, oh, but it's not matching everything else. I want to reset that master and everything will go back to normal. So it's the same with the color. For whatever reason, I don't understand it. Once you change the theme colors, some things don't change. You just need to reapply that. It's not a big deal. But if anything doesn't look right on your page ever, just try resetting the layout.
I want to thank you. I think we're kind of out of time. We're running. It's 17 after the hour. I want to say thank you so much, and this has been just phenomenal. You've done a great job with the comments, our best webinar ever. Nolan, this was awesome. And I just want to say thank you so much for doing it, and thank everybody for coming. At this time, we're going to close out the webinar.